This is Detroit's Morning Answer with John Anthony on FM 92.7 and AM 1400. The Answer.
They're basically...
The state's been on a string of passing record-breaking budgets. At some point, that money's going to run out. And for a lot of people I've talked to on both sides of the aisle, they think this is the year where this budget is going to have to be shorter than last year, just for the absence of federal dollars or what have you. Where would you be okay with cutting back in the budget?
The reality is that there's just less money at the table, right? And so, regardless of who the Speaker of the House is, there's going to be a smaller budget this year because a lot of those funds are running out. Democrats knew that with the way that the budgets were planned in prior years.
Oh, did they really? So then why don't we have a budget in Michigan, Leader Puri? Joining us to discuss this and more is Representative Joe Aragona. He represents Michigan's 60th District. And I'm going to tell you guys, he has quickly established himself as a voice for fiscal responsibility and community-centered leadership. As we know, the deadline has gone and passed for finalizing Michigan state budget. Representative Aragona has been directly engaged in the tough negotiations over spending priorities, accountability, and how your tax-paying dollars will shape the year ahead. Representative, welcome back to Detroit's Morning Answer.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
Representative, where do things stand right now in the effort to finalize Michigan state budget, and how would you describe the tone of the negotiations?
Right now, it's tough. We're kind of far apart, and the reason is because the Senate Democrats won't sit down at a table and actually give us a plan. You just played a great clip. It says that even Minority Leader Puri was admitting that we had to reduce our spending this year. Well, the Senate Democrats didn't do that. They overspent by $1 billion, and they plan on spending $3 billion on roads. But they didn't make any cuts for it, which means they have to raise your taxes. They have to raise taxes for roads. They have to raise taxes for all of the other spending that they want to do because they made zero cuts, even though they knew that they were going to only be able to spend less this year. We're going to have less revenues this year because we're going to get less federal monies this year. So, all of a sudden they have to raise your taxes. Now they sit down at the table and like, well, we have to raise taxes. And as Republicans, we say, well, we made cuts. We found money in the budget for roads. We only, we spent $5 billion less than you guys did. Let me ask you something, Senate Democrats. Where do you want to raise taxes? And they say, well, that's your problem.
What?
I mean, that's what they keep saying. I mean, they've been in the news telling people to ask House Republicans where they should raise taxes. We don't want to raise taxes,
right?
But we don't have their plan. So that's what's really holding up this budget right now.
Representative, but I look at this. I think about throughout the country, COVID and the COVID money that came in to subsidize a lot of these state budgets. That's part of the problem that the Senate Dems don't want to have to deal with, correct? Because when all that money, a lot of these state these states, they balance their budgets off of the COVID money. How much of a impediment has that been to get to climb over that hill?
Oh, it's been huge. It's been huge. And here's the deal. With those federal dollars, we knew they were running out. It's almost like if you go to your job, you get paid throughout the year, and your boss says, hey, you're going to get a really big Christmas bonus, but next year I can't give this to you. You're going to get a very small one, if anything at all. Well, you can either take those dollars and blow it on extravagant things like swimming pools for districts that my constituents shouldn't be paying for swimming pools and splash pads on the other side of the state.
Yeah.
Or you can take those dollars, invest them, keep them for a rainy day, that type of thing. But that's not what the Democrats did. And now they just want to raise taxes and say, well, we're not getting the money from the feds. Let's raise taxes on Michiganders so we can keep spending on as much as we want.
When you first came into this process, what were your top non-negotiable priorities for the budget?
So we wanted to make sure we got more money for schools. We wanted to make sure we got a roads deal done without raising any revenues. So those were like the really two big things. But unfortunately, again, the Senate Democrats passed like even a schools plan that didn't spend as much as we did. We brought as much money to schools as we could, and we told the school boards, look, you guys figure out which programs. We're not going to tie your hands like Senate Democrats did and said, here's some money only for this program. Here's some money for only that program. You guys know best in your own school districts. Here are the dollars that we can appropriate to you. Make sure you spend them wisely. Yeah. It's up to you. You guys are also elected. Again, with roads, we found $3 billion without raising revenues, without taxing anybody. But unfortunately, Senate Democrats don't even want to look at that.
Yeah. One of the things I've always been told is that from citizens and voters is that they feel the budget process is too opaque, unclear. It's murky. It's clouded. What are there any reforms or any safeguards that you're advocating to make sure taxpayers can see how every dollar is being spent?
Yeah, so if you go to our House website, just to be more open, what House Republicans did, which has never been done before, is any request that we've put in, you can see it, and you can see our name tied to it. For instance, I have a request in for a road project in Macomb Township called Broden Road. It'll be kind of boulevarded. It's not just going to be a standard road. It's going to go right by Township Hall. I asked for state dollars for that particular project. In the past, that would just make it into the budget, right? Yeah. It would just be something I'd have to try and figure out how to get an amendment in. Well, this year, any of those types of requests, we have to put our name on it. We have to sign a piece of paper, and then that all goes online, so you can see exactly what everybody's requesting in special projects. Yeah. So that's one big open thing, and then any type of project that truly gets considered, we actually do a hearing on that project. So I had to go and say, look, this is what the project is. This is why it's important to my district. This is why it's important to the region. But that's never been done before in the history of our state, and that's not even what the Senate did. So that's what we're trying to do, to be open and more transparent.
You hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, this new funding toward law enforcement and public safety, that shouldn't even be in there." What Representative Aragona? How will this budget strengthen the work of police and first responders, specifically in your district and across Michigan?
Yeah. So my colleague, Representative Mike Harris from over in Oakland County, he's a former police officer himself. He did a lot of great work on our public safety funding. So we actually are trying to get more dollars, and it's going to be like a year-over-year type of formula where we get more dollars specifically for training, for officers, for equipment directly to these police departments, especially the ones that see a little higher crime in their areas, or at least have more population, to make sure that they can properly police, right? We want to make sure we put police officers on the road. And that's another frustrating thing about this whole budget process that we're trying to negotiate with the Senate. They're accusing us of cutting the state police, for instance. Mm-hmm. I mean, first of all, how many people are going to believe that Republicans are going to cut police, number one? Number two, we cut out about 4,300 phantom employees. So these are employees that budgets have been funding for years now, that the legislature has been funding for years now. But the problem is there's nobody actually sitting in that seat. There's nobody actually doing the job. Yeah. The work is getting done by the department, but we're still funding it, which means we're giving that money to the department, and it's kind of becoming a slush fund. It's a way for them to just kind of use dollars wherever they want. We cut out those 4,300 employees. Some of those employees, were in a state police line item. They weren't officers on roads or anything like that, but we ended up cutting those out of the budget. So that's about $500 million that we saved Michigan taxpayers. But unfortunately, the Senate Democrats now want to hit us for, you're cutting that department, you're cutting people out of here, you're cutting people out of there. Well, guess what? There wasn't anybody working in those jobs anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Speaker Hall spoke to this. I want to get your take.
They're basically using your dollars, the public, to make money. How many of the phantom employees exist across government? In FY20, there's 3,800 of these phantom employees. FY21, 4,700. FY22, 5,100. FY23, 3,300. FY24 $4,900. So $176,100 per person for these phantom jobs. You look at departments and you say every single year these departments are overshooting by hundreds of jobs, and then they're work projecting the money and they're building slush funds. They're basically using your dollars, the public, to make money.
Representative, how does that happen in a state? Where are the auditors? Where's the oversight?
Yeah, well, great question. I mean, that's what we're trying to bring to the legislator now, right? But basically, what ends up happening from a ground level is there's a new project that gets implemented, or even well-meaning representatives and legislators will say, the department needs to start doing X, the department needs to start doing Y, and the departments rarely ever say no. They just say, oh, well, we could, but it's going to take us 3 people, so you're going to have to make sure that we hire another 3 people and allocate us X amount of dollars. And unfortunately, sometimes those numbers just kind of go through the budget process, in which case maybe they didn't actually need 3 people, and maybe they didn't actually need that many dollars. But if they get appropriated once, they tend to stay there in the budget year over year over year.
Yeah.
And that's really what, Speaker Hall, with his, House Ethics, Accountability, and Transparency Plan, our Appropriations Chair, Ann Bolin, and Matt Maddock, these guys have really honed in on every single line item and said, hold on a second, we're going to ask questions about every single thing. I mean, we did about as close to zero-based budgeting as you possibly could here in Michigan for our budget.
Man, if all states can go to zero-based budgeting, and everybody has to come and say, this is what we need now. I mean, man, that would change the game here in Michigan. But, Representative Aragona, has there been a deadline set for this budget to be passed? And if the budget isn't finalized by that deadline, what services are most at risk? And what does that mean for everyday Michiganders?
Yeah, great question. We haven't had a shutdown since the Granholm administration. Back in, I think it was 2008 was the last one. So it's been quite a while. At that point, if we get to that point, the vast majority, I believe, of state workers will just be furloughed. We don't want that to happen. We actually passed a shutdown prevention plan. So within our $80 billion budget, we looked and found all right, here's a large percentage of, 20, 30, 40% of the dollars that we know we're going to agree on, whether it's us and in the Senate, the most conservative person in the legislature, the most liberal person in the legislature, we're going to agree on these numbers, bare minimum. Prisons, keeping state police on the roads, schools, those types of really base numbers. We passed a shutdown prevention plan saying, let's at least spend this. If we don't have a budget, we can always overwrite this, but if we don't have a budget, let's at least pass this so that the state can continue to operate these particular departments after October 1 if there is a shutdown. Yeah. And unfortunately, the Senate they haven't passed that. They haven't given us where they want to raise revenues. So right now, it's a bit frustrating for us because we feel like nobody else wants to actually work on this budget, and the Democrats just kind of want us run to a shutdown right now.
What's surprising is the governor is more in a line with Speaker Hall and you guys than the Senate. What's your take on the area where the governor's office and the legislature, specifically speaking about the Senate Democrats, what's your take on the areas where the governor's office and the legislature remain furthest apart? Are we going to see? Is there any light in there somewhere that gives you hope?
It's refreshing that the governor is at least saying, here's my base plan, right? She's even saying, look, I want a roads plan. She was the Fix the Damn Roads governor. That's what she ran on 7 years ago. She's saying she's got to have it this year. And House Republicans are willing to sit down at the table and say, all right, here's our plan. This is how we do it. I think if we were just negotiating with the governor, we probably would have had a plan by now, and we might even had a budget kicked out by now. I really think that. But unfortunately, we're not only negotiating with her. We do have to negotiate with Leader Brinks.
Yeah, I'd be afraid to go up against Mad Dog and Representative Ann Bolin. I think that's especially that
They're tough
Mad Dog.
negotiators.
Yes, they are. But Representative, final question: if you could leave your constituents with one message about this budget fight, what would you want them to know about your role in it?
So I'm fighting for Macomb County. I'm doing my best to ensure that taxpayers aren't paying more, that we just simply would live within our means, which is what my constituents do. They understand, look, this is a budget. This is what I make per year. This is what I can spend per year. This is what I want to save per year. And unfortunately, there's a lot of legislators that just don't do that. They way overspend and they don't care where the money comes from. So just know that all of us House Republicans are fighting for that. And I'm definitely fighting for that for people in the middle of Macomb County.
I lied about last question. People that are listening, I mean, what role, I'm sorry. At least I tell on myself. What role should constituents play in ensuring that this budget gets finalized? Because they have all of the power. And I think sometimes constituents don't understand the power they possess. What role should that they play in ensuring that this budget gets done and it gets done right away?
I would contact your state legislators. If you're listening and you know who your state rep is or your state senator, or if you don't, look them up. Let them know what you think. Do you want your taxes raised? Let them know. That you do or you don't. I mean, most people are going to say they don't. The governor proposed a couple of different things. I mean, I believe she proposed a tax on online gambling. She proposed a tax on marijuana establishments. When she first got in office, she proposed a 50-cent gas tax increase. Those are the types of things that, she at least she's coming to the table and saying, look, this is what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But the Senate Democrats, they aren't even locking that down, saying exactly what they want. And the amount that they have to overspend, I mean, their budget is $1 billion over what's constitutional. So they either have to cut out $1 billion, which they're clearly not willing to do, or we have to raise, if we're going to use their budget, we have to raise $1 billion in revenue. And then we still need to raise $3 billion for roads. So in total, it's over $4 billion that we need to figure out where we're going to get from the 10 million people of Michigan. So, those are just kind of the numbers and where they lay. You let your state legislators know exactly what you think and where it should be coming from.
Yeah, and I also think finding $5 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse could also help as well. Representative.
Right.
Representative Joe Aragona, thank you for joining us. I think when sometimes the people don't understand the state budget, it may sound like numbers on paper, but it truly represents the priorities, the values, and the direction Michigan is heading. And I always value and appreciate your insight and your leadership in this critical moment for the state of Michigan. Thanks so much for joining us, sir.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, that's Representative Joe Aragona. He represents Michigan's 60th district. Always comes on and is clear, concise, and always informing you about just how Michigan representatives, specifically in the House, are always looking out for you. I mean, when you look at the transparency that they've introduced, you heard what he said. For the first time ever in Michigan, you can now these representatives have to put their name. That is, you understand how crucial that is to budgeting, where now people can actually see who's doing this stuff. In times past, they would hide under the radar because they didn't have to show. That's true transparency. And guess what? That means they're working for you. I know sometimes you get frustrated and flustered about how the budgeting process and how the sausage making is done. But these Michigan Republicans have opened up that process for you to see. That is, I can't begin to tell you how huge that is. And State Representative Joe Aragona is leading that charge. Man, Michigan, I'm jelly. Detroit's Morning Answer. We'll be right back.